Welcome to Quarantine with Lou, and we're going to continue on the series of Keep On Leading. And this is a book, a leadership book that I wrote, and I've been recording audio version and just kind of putting it out there for teams and leaders to use and actually learn something and help their teams. So we've already published the introduction, and this is chapter 1, humility. Uh, I'm also giving myself a little bit of freedom here to. I'm going to tell the same stories and give the same information as the book, but I'm doing it in a little bit different style and just kind of telling a story. And so this chapter begins in 2005, my arrival at Fort Bragg. And I graduated college in May of 2004. And on June 6th, 2004, which was the 60th anniversary of D-Day, I started my officer basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. And then as soon as that was over, I went to Ranger School. And then I went to airborne school in January of 2005. And I'm pretty sure it was the day I graduated airborne school because I had a friend that had already arrived. That day, I got a phone call from the personnel office there at the unit that I was going to at Fort Bragg. And they asked, how long is it going to take for you to get here? And so I want to say it was like a 6 hour drive. And I just packed up my stuff and left and head straight to Fort Bragg from graduation of airborne school, or once everything was packed up. So I got there to Fort Bragg. I found the location that I was going to, and it was Friday. It was afternoon. I want to say it was after 3 o'clock in the afternoon by the time I got there. And so the building was mostly empty, and I got to where the colonel's office was, and there was a little lieutenant guy there, and he's like, "Yeah, you can." He's expecting you, and so I go and I knock on the door and uh, give the whole Lieutenant Fernandez reporting as ordered, sir. And he looked up from his computer and he says, "Report." And so I stepped into the office and I stood there, and um, he kind of looked at me, and he stood up, and I'm not a very big guy. I'm about 5'7", 5'8", depending on the day, 5'6", depending on what I've been doing. So this guy was over 6 feet and probably 230, 240 pounds. And he stood up and got real close to me. And, he had all of the cool guy badges and stuff. And he goes, "Tell me, Lieutenant, did you earn your tab?" Talking about the Ranger tab. And I was expecting the question. So um, my friend that I talked about that had shown up earlier, he told me about this, how this conversation was going to go. And so I looked at him and I smiled and I said, "Yes, sir." And uh, you know, the thing about Ranger School is they break you down and they make you feel like absolute nothing, and then they build you back up. But when they would build you back up, you literally feel invincible. And that's, I mean, I felt that. I felt like I could not be defeated after having graduated that course, which is a little bit dangerous, particularly in combat. But, you know, for a 22-year-old lieutenant entering the combat realm, like, I guess it worked. So yes, I said, "Yes, sir," and he smiled, and it's like, "All right, well, you're going to Bravo Company, and I'm going to call your commander, and he's going to come pick you up." And so he picked up the phone. He's like, "Hey, Brandon, your new lieutenant's here. Come on down." And so that was when I got to meet Brandon Teague, who's the guy who wrote the forward. And at the time, he was Captain Teague, and Captain Teague is, he wasn't a very big guy. Built a lot like me, and kind of in shape, soft spoken, just sort of a comfortable person. He didn't feel intimidated being around him, and he didn't strike me as like your typical combat leader. And when I think about like the type of leader that he was and the things that he drove us to do, it's pretty amazing that you truly can't judge a book by the cover. And he's an incredible leader, so courageous, and would follow that dude absolutely anywhere. And so anyway, we leave out of there, and we were kind of walking across this big open parade field that the brigade had, heading towards our office. And um, he was kind of telling me a little bit about the platoon that I was going to take over, and that they've had a string of bad leaders, and there was going to be a challenge winning the men over, because they um, understandably had some apprehensions about getting somebody new in there. And then he told me about my platoon sergeant, who Staff Sergeant Anderson, and at the time he was a staff sergeant, and Steve Anderson is quite a character. But all that Teague told me was like, he's a strong leader and a big personality, and it'd be wise of you to listen to him and remember that it's his platoon. And so we sat down in the office, and we continued our chat, and as I'm sitting in his office, I'm kind of looking around at the plaques and the stuff that he has, and he's got this large plaque from the best ranger competition, which at the time I knew about. Like, these are the most elite guys go and compete against each other, and I couldn't quite tell, but it looked like he had placed in that competition. I mean, just finishing it is a feat, or being able to go and represent is a big deal. Finishing it is a big deal, and placing is a huge deal. So I'm kind of looking around, and I see all these different plaques and stuff, and he goes, "Hey, we're doing a platoon live fire on Monday, and you're going to lead your platoon, and the XO is going to give you some gear." So, okay. So my first day with my platoon is going to be, live munitions, hitting a house, like, all right, let's do this. Um, this is what I was ready for. This is what I came for. And he goes, "Oh, and by the way, we're going to Afghanistan in like 7 weeks." Like, okay, here we go. Like, I joined the army to go to war. There was a point in time during my college degree that I thought maybe I was going to miss the war. Um, and now I was going to be there. I was heading to the desert in less than 2 months. And so, um, the next few weeks, I had an opportunity to get to know the guys, but also to get to know Captain Teague. And he was clear about learning from the platoon sergeant whatever you could, and just shutting your mouth and paying attention, and leading with humility. um and so we went out there. I did that live fire exercise. It went well. um and came back and started going, and Teague says, we're doing officer PT. So um we'd been out in the field for a week. We came back, and he's like, "I just want to run with my officers." So there's like 5 of us, and he gets us together, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna go do Coolie Conch." And I didn't know what Coolie Conch was, but I could tell by the look on the other guys' faces, like, this is not a fun run. And Coolie Conch is, I want to say it's like 6 mile run. It's 3 miles to the top of this hill slash mountain. And so you run for 3 miles uphill, and then you run 3 miles back. And it was absolutely brutal. It was embarrassing how bad I ran. And I couldn't keep up with the group, and they ran ahead, and I started to fall back, and I remember seeing these guys, that there was points in the run where you're almost putting your hands in front of you, and these guys are just hopping from hill, little stump to stump and hill to hill, and going up this red dirt clay kind of, it's a big trail, but it's a big red clay trail, and they're just hopping up it like it's no issue. And I'm struggling. There's points where I'm walking, and I could see them at the top waiting for me by the time I got there, and Teague was not happy. And so, we finished the run, and he he pulls me aside, and the thing is, in Ranger school and airborne school, I mean, you do some running. You don't do this kind of stuff in Ranger school. Most of what you're doing is just walking, but you've got, 120, 150 pounds on your pack or whatever it is. And you're doing a lot of marching in the woods and the like. So it's easy. It's a different type of exercise. And I wasn't ready for this. And so, it was a quick lesson when I'm coming out of this course and I'm feeling like, I'm this huge badass because I got a Ranger tab. And yeah, no, you're not this huge badass, right? Like you can't, you can't even keep up on this little run with your buddies here. And, so he made it a point to, sit me down and we have this conversation, and I had to do some self-reflecting about, the tab really doesn't mean anything. It wasn't going to keep the enemy from killing me, and it wasn't enough, you not being able to live off of previous accomplishments. And this is kind of one of the key points of this, is that what you've done has gotten you to where you are, but it's not going to take you to where you're going. Like, congratulations, you did well. Use that as a foundational, but now you need to continue to move forward. And I can rant and rave about all the things I've accomplished in the past. It doesn't get me anywhere in the future, right? Like, that lesson of being humble, um, and stop trying to thrust your previous accomplishments into the present like it's some sort of qualifier for whatever task is at hand. Like, you still have to do the task at hand. So there is a place for that. They fill your ego, they give you confidence, they get you ready to take on the next thing. That's great. They teach you lessons, and so that, and they may even give people around you to respect you a little bit more, and that's cool. But that's not going to get you to the next step. And if you're reading this or listening to this, you want to be respected and you want your opinions to matter and all of these things. You can't rely on your past to give you that credit in the future, and you got to learn to be humble. And so take a moment and as you're listening here, think about some people that you've known in the past, those that were always quick to tell their story, the notorious, the one-uppers, right? Oh, well, my story was always better. And how did these people make you feel when they were around? I mean, oftentimes when you get a one-upper, people just stop telling stories because they don't want that person to come and do their one-up. Did those people ever inspire you? Did they make you want to follow them? Did they make you want to do your best work? I mean, probably not. Um, in the Army, the Green Berets, they're known as the quiet professionals. And what's interesting, I have a few friends that made it through that course. I personally did not. But when you've accomplished something real, and you've challenged yourself, and you've actually made it, you don't really have to spend a lot of time talking about how badass you are. You can be confident without being arrogant, and you can be humble. And so, when I think back to Captain Teague, I'm reminded about the strength he had and his humility. And, he never needed to talk about himself and what he accomplished. Um, but, at the same time, he could run most of the guys into the ground, and he was a tactical master, in the battlefield, and he was bold and courageous. And, no matter what was coming at him, he fought fiercely, and he earned a Silver Star while we were over there. Uh, and like I said, that to this day, one of the greatest leaders I have ever met. And I truly would follow that guy straight into hell, and feel comfortable about it. And he almost did. He told me to climb a mountain with the enemy force that was 5 times our size, and we did it. And we did it with a smile. And I'll tell that story here in a little bit in another chapter. But that's the power of great leadership, and that you know, in over 15 years of leading people, and approaching 20 at this point, um, people will surprise you on what they can accomplish, and they'll astonish you with the extremes that they push themselves, and they'll shock you with how creative they can be, and they'll humble you with the loyalty they portray. I mean, it's just going to overwhelm you with pride with when a team is going. That humility needs to be genuine, and not the self-deprecating stuff or a fake attempt at humility, like, the humble brag type stuff. So, I want to give you an example of, the Jewish carpenter in the Middle East. And regardless of where your feelings are and the truth about Christ claims, um, his example of leadership is certainly something that we can examine and learn about it. And so, talking about in John chapter 13, it's the night of the Passover meal. And this is where he gives his final lesson before the crucifixion. And for Christians, it becomes, it's the Last Supper, and the communion is in commemoration of this. So, without prompting and saying nothing, Jesus gets up. He takes off his robe, wraps around a towel around his waist, and begins to wash the feet of his disciples. And Peter, who later becomes one of the leaders of the Christian church, he's like, no, 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 yeah, you shouldn't be washing mine. I should be washing your feet. And, the Bible doesn't spend a lot of time in the simple interaction, but it's important to note the lesson in humility that Jesus, sets by example. He doesn't call himself humble. He just humbles himself. Okay. And this is really, really important. Almost effectively, if you say, oh, I'm a very humble person, like all of a sudden you're not, right? So you have to do these actions. He's not self-deprecating. He doesn't pretend that he doesn't have power. He doesn't do a humble brag. He doesn't talk about how humble he is. He just dresses himself down, and through his actions shows his humility and proves he's willing to do any job. And this is the tool that can set you apart as a leader. And I learned it not long after that Kulikan run, where I realized, oh, okay, I still have a lot to learn. And I started observing those great leaders around me and the guys that commanded the most respect. And, some of the things that they do is that they were the last to eat. They were the first to pick up a broom when cleaning needed done. They slept in the trenches with their men in the same condition. They took that crappy guard shift in the middle of the night. They proved their humility through their actions, and the men absolutely adored them for it. And I quickly realized what a powerful force humility through action was, and started to implement it immediately in my own leadership. And, throughout my career, I've used this tool um, to place my own needs last and the needs of my employees first. And doing that, you have this kind of, I like to call the servant leader outlook, and a lot of people will probably agree with me on that. But doing that is what's going to give you that loyalty and that strength, in kind of like this open hand type thing. So all of this is in your hands, and you have the ability and the power to do this, and you can start tomorrow. And so at the end of each chapter, I want to give you an action item, something that you can do. And we're talking about humility here. So what is one thing you can do right now with your team to humble yourself? And maybe it's pick up a broom and sweep, or go out there and do a presentation on behalf of somebody, or give up your chair, hold the door open. I don't know, find some ways to humble yourself this week, and really think about it and do it. And set yourself a reminder, when this is over, grab the phone and say, okay, did you humble yourself today or something? And think about ways that you can do that. And start setting yourself in that mindset of, how can I humble myself, with actual action? So go and do that this week, and stay tuned and subscribe so you don't miss the next few chapters. Thanks.